Welcome everyone to Forgotten Feminists. Welcome to you, Liz. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And especially grateful thank you to you because I know that you're fighting jet lag. You've been traveling around the world and you just got back from Nepal, right?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's good to be here.
Yeah, of course. So you and I have been kind of like Twitter friends for a while now. And it's been really great getting to know you. And I'm really excited to introduce you to everybody who's here today and everybody who will be watching this. Just to give everyone a background, can you let me know, I know you grew up Christian and your family is Italian, but also British. Yeah. I want to ask you about growing up Christian. So what was it about being a Christian that sort of that you were looking for more? What made you start to look towards other religions? Like what was your discomfort with Christianity?
I would describe growing up not as a fully practicing Christian, but more than say a vaguely kind of cultural Christian. So my mom, being Italian, was brought up Catholic, but then she moved to Anglican church. And my dad wasn't religious at all, but agreed that we'd be brought up Christians. So we did go to church every 7 days at a certain point growing up. We did go to like the occasional kind of Christian kind of summer camp. So it was more than the let's just have a baptism and go to church for Christmas. But we wouldn't, for example, like say prayers in the home together. We wouldn't read the Bible together or anything like that. But I think it was more the values were there and a kind of monotheistic kind of thread throughout. Looking back, I think it taught me a lot about kind of the dynamics of sort of interfaith relationships and mixed marriages because my dad wasn't of faith. I went to a church school, but I think that was more for the educational standard as it was an independent school rather than the religious upbringing. But yeah, I did identify as a Christian, but it more in a way that it kind of just made me think about kind of morality and like a personal relationship. I didn't really identify in terms of sort of cultural social circles as Christian. And it wasn't until I got older and I actually started exploring Islam with not with the intention of converting, but through kind of a cultural path that I was at that kind of age of my life where I thought it's time to kind of reflect on faith. And I can pick any faith I want. I don't have to be of the faith that I'm necessarily brought up with. But I started going back to church and trying to kind of rediscover myself as a Christian. And I was sort of my late teens, early 20s.
Mm-hmm. So around that time you were going to youth groups or you passed the youth group age at that time?
The youth groups, I would say I was more sort of 10, 11. Didn't particularly enjoy them, but we did go to these sort of Christian events. My dad would drop us off and then go home. I started kind of going back to church services late teens, and then by university age, I felt I wanted to connect back with the church, but felt that because I'd been so cut off from it, that sort of perhaps would I be wanted? Did I even fit in? And it just sort of happened that overlapped at the same time that I was learning about Islam as well, from like a cultural perspective, learning Arabic, traveling abroad. So it all kind of overlapped, and it was that sort of time of when you're in your early 20s, late teens, where you're sort of discovering who you are and who you want to be. So I started rediscovering Christianity and discovered that it just wasn't the faith for me.
So why wasn't it the faith for you?
Primarily, I just didn't believe in the Trinity and the sort of personing of Jesus. So it was really more a theological thing. While it gave me a lot of comfort in the sense that it was going to be easy being a Muslim, you know, with all these struggles of identity and big changes, I just didn't theologically feel at home with it. It just didn't feel right for me.
Okay, and then when you started looking at different religions to find the one that was right for you. What was it about Islam that made you feel that it was right for you?
Yeah, so I still kind of firmly believed in the Abrahamic trend. I still believed that Jesus was important. So I said to myself, well, Judaism's cool, but it's not for me. Monotheistic, Abrahamic kind of trend. And I had no intention of converting to Islam. I mean, looking back, it all kind of looks obvious, like learning Arabic. I met a lot of Muslim friends. My school shifted to a more religious school just because of where the Arabic school was placed, visiting a mosque, and I felt very comfortable, but it wasn't my intention at all. It just kind of made sense in terms of how I saw Jesus, his role as a sort of mortal person. I wasn't interested in non-monotheistic faiths. Again, Judaism was great, but I still believed in Jesus as a sort of Messiah, as somebody of big importance. And it just kind of made sense really to me.
So at what point did you meet the man that you married? Was the, we're not going to say his name, but he was from Algeria, right? We can say that.
Yeah, we're now divorced. Yeah.
So we'll call him the Algerian.
We kind of met phase where I'd kind of discovered Islam on a more kind of spiritual basis at this point. I'd had kind of spiritual moments, but there's a lot to unpack there in terms of identity. It's a big change, and I felt kind of a bit lost with it all. And that was the time that we met through other kind of career related networks, because we both studied languages, etc. And he was a really good kind of like emotional support for me, and it was able to answer all my questions. And so I met him as a Christian, and we did fall in love, and it was very important to me that he accepted me as a Christian and not just marry me as a Muslim woman, which he did. But yeah, the two kind of overlapped, but I converted before we got married. So the conversion was mine, regardless of what would happen with the marriage. My spirituality is mine, and we're divorced and I'm still Muslim now.
Okay, so now I want to ask you a bit about the conversion thought process, because obviously that's not something that I'm familiar with. So most people that I have spoken with who converted to Islam, most women, I should say, because for men it's different. For men it's actually quite depressing. We'll talk about men in a minute, but for women, I found that a lot of women who converted to Islam came from strict Christian backgrounds. So they'd be like Mormon or some sort of fundamentalist Christian like that, so that the leap from their sect of Christianity to Islam wasn't that big of a leap when you think of modesty culture and things like that. They generally would have had negative, like difficult childhoods or difficult lives, difficult upbringings, and they're in their early 20s or something, and they're feeling at that point just exhausted. And the idea of having a man, the quote that causes so much anxiety and anger in a lot of women, which is 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗆𝗧, men are responsible for women. I found it so interesting that for a lot of women who convert, they actually like that ayah. They like that verse because it makes them feel, I guess they're stressed out with being a modern woman and having so many expectations, and they just feel like there's this comfort level with knowing that, okay, it's this man's responsibility to take care of me. And then of course, after a few years, if they ever want to stand up on their own 2 feet or have their own independence, they find like, oh wait, maybe I don't like that verse as much as I thought I did. But at the time they were just really tired. So I guess what I'm asking you is, where was your mindset as far as a woman joining Islam? Like you knew that there were expectations as far as hijab, as far as obeying your husband, much more, I guess, expectations for a woman were much more severe than they would be for you as a Christian woman growing up in the UK, especially nominally Christian. How did you feel about that? Like, did that give you any discomfort? Or, yeah.
I want to instinctively say that those women's experiences is completely different to mine, but I think that would be naive to say that. So sort of to unpack it all, I didn't think at the time that there was any kind of unhealthy dynamic. I grew up, culturally Christian, had, full boyfriend relationships, drinking, all of that kind of, standard kind of life. And at the time that I was sort of looking at faith and exploring Islam, looking back, I made some changes that sort of are in line with Islamic beliefs. So I'm just going to be really quite frank and open here, nothing to be embarrassed about. I decided that after this one particular relationship, where looking back, it was emotionally abusive, but I didn't realize at the time that it would be classified as that, but it was. After that, I thought, right, that's it. I want the next person to be like the one. I suppose I had this kind of like romanticized image. And I'd, met friends abroad who were more conservative. Obviously, they weren't going to have sex before marriage. So my beliefs were changing. Now I can see in line with Islamic beliefs, but at the time that wasn't my intention. So I decided, right, that was it. I wasn't going to have sex again until I was married. This kind of romantic idea that it was going to be like the one. It was going to be this like really special, thing. Looking back, that's probably got something to do with the fact that I was in an abusive relationship. Around the time I converted again, my mom was also dying. So that must have had something to do with that in terms of emotional stability and everything, in terms of identity, sense of belonging, family. When a mother dies, the sense of family just kind of changed, doesn't it? So, like I said, I'd be naive to say none of those experiences are valid because no, I didn't grow up in a conservative religious environment. I was free to drink, party, have sex, just live a normal kind of Western life, all of that. But I had started making changes. I was dressing more conservatively. I stopped drinking. Obviously, I was trying to sort of slowly embrace Islam. I decided I wasn't going to be with a man again until we were married. So there were some of these slow changes, but they were all my changes. But looking back, there's obviously some psychological pressures there in terms of a relationship that ended up being abusive, where, I was accused of doing X, Y, Z, got very jealous and possessive. And then obviously like my mother dying, all those kind of things. So clearly there are some things there. It would be naive to say, everything was perfect and it was just the way it is. That verse wasn't something that I pondered on. I thought, as this like human rights person, that if anything, that whole kind of narrative of, oh, but we're free from the sexualization of Western culture. It was in a different way, like, oh, hijab is so empowering because people don't think about your physical features. You can just be you and you can be accepted as this intellectual woman you are. I thought it was going to be really empowering. I was making this choice that was so different to everything else I'd been brought up with. Which is funny because now I just think, wow, I was convinced I'd wear hijab forever and now I can't stand it. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And I did accept the idea that the man would have the final say, but I don't think I took it to that degree where I felt like I was entering into this sort of, the way you describe it, almost as the semi-cult where the man is in charge. The narrative was, men and women are both equal, Islam came and empowered women, etc., etc. But that the roles would be that, if I had children, that would be my primary role as long as my career didn't kind of, overtake that. But I suppose the man would have the final say. And in Algeria, he would have the final say. So, and I suppose, whilst I also struggled with that, I think looking back, I'm going to be completely honest, there's something that I kind of liked about that this is sort of like protective jealousy, that like this man loves you, and there's this sort of structure, and it is a bit creepy, I think. So yes,
no, I hear that a lot, Liz.
Experience, but there's obviously strands there that overlap, I think, if we're to unpack it and look at kind of what kind of place I was in psychologically. I think the Algerian thing, it gave me a sense of family and belonging. Because if you're marrying someone into a different family where you don't have a faith with that family, it's very different than just them accepting you as a person. You're part of this spiritual family. I think it gave me a sense of stability, knowing that I had this new family as well as the family that obviously was slightly not crumbled. Me and my dad have an amazing relationship. It's obviously different when you've not got that female head of the house.
Yeah.
And I think it gave a sense of belonging. And I think looking back, I probably enjoyed the sense of structure and rules. You do this, you do that. You can be a good person by doing X, Y, Z, and this is the way it is, which is very different to how I live my life now. But that requires a certain amount of confidence. So yeah, it would be naive to say my experience is totally different to theirs. There's obviously overlap, but I did not have that experience growing up, and that was not my intention whatsoever. I felt like I was empowering myself, taking on my faith, and doing this almost sort of like anti-Western feminist kind of move of it's going to be all about me and my intellect, not how I look physically.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like when you move to a new country and you're just like so excited, the different foods, look at the music and this culture and the style and you just get so excited by everything. And then after a few years of living there, you're like, oh my gosh, I never noticed what a shithole this place is. It's exotic.
I got to a tired point where I was like, I just want to be me again. Like, it was 7 years, like almost. I actually miss being me. Yeah. I didn't realize I wasn't me at the time. That I became a new me. I was still the same person, but yeah, there's big shifts that now I'm shocked. I was like, wow, that was like a totally, but it didn't, those changes didn't feel that big. They just felt totally natural at the time because it's what I wanted.
Yes, yes. Yeah, they're slow changes, and you agree to every little step, and it takes a while before you start to realize that you're in a completely different environment than to where you started. I think it makes a big difference too with who the man is who has the responsibility and control of you. You know what I mean? So that just, it gives him a lot of power. If he's a good man, then things are fine. You know, he will interpret that as taking care of you. You know,
I don't think he felt like that was the dynamic, and neither did I. It was only when we both tried to push things and I tried to change things that I realized that it felt like there was this sort of force. Like I see as both victims of, because a therapist once said to me, oh, it sounded very controlling. I was like, he wasn't being controlling. He only knew what he was brought up with. It was almost like there was a system of rules. And when you abide by those rules, you both know where your place is. But once somebody starts changing that, it disrupts it. So I don't feel like he was trying to control me. He is still one of my best friends. He's an amazing person. We were just trying to be the people that we thought we should be, live the way that we only knew. And it was when that dynamic tried to change, like he tried to change and I would push it, and I tried to change, but then there'd be this tension and this conflict.
Yeah, totally see that. Yeah, there's a conversation that I just had yesterday with a friend of mine about her husband, who is Arab, and although they're not living in the Arab world, it's just the culture, it's how he was raised, it's the society, he's socialized in a certain way, and she's socialized because she's Arab too.
It's the little things of how you're brought up. I still believe in like intercultural marriage, interfaith marriage, all of that. But it's the little things that you don't really know because you take it for granted. But when you're brought up in a fundamentally different environment, there are, even just the smallest thing can make a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to take it back to you when you converted and make another generalization about converts. The other generalization is that, you know, I'll talk about, for example, one of the first converts that I ever met, I was like 16 or 17 at the time, and she was the same age as me. And she had just married this Palestinian man that's in our community. And then like immediately she's leading the halaqah, which is the women's circle for those of you who are unaware of what that word means. So she sort of became like the teacher to the rest of us. She was held up on such a pedestal. She was like, you know, the trophy convert, you know, look, we have a blonde haired, blue eyed one, you know, it was this. So did you have that experience as well? Were you put up on a pedestal like that?
Not so much. In fact, actually, I mean, people are always very enthusiastic and they want to know your story, which I understand. If anything, it can go either that way or a very lonely way. And something that really annoyed me, I felt like people didn't take me seriously until they knew I was married.
Oh.
And that to this day really bugs me. So, you know, there's this obsession with, oh, you need to do this performance ritual of, you know, in front of people and you have a certificate. And it's like, why do I need to prove to anybody? You know, it's a very big moment. I did it all personally on my own with God. And it's like this idea that, you know, I came to a community, and even though I'd been Muslim for, I don't know, like a year at this point or 2 years, and I was married, they wanted me to do the whole, you know, ceremony thing again. And it wasn't until I said that I was married, I'm not legally at this point, but religiously married, like it kind of just, you know, it died down. And when he then came over to the UK and people met him, I felt like, oh, now it all fitted into place. Like now I don't know if that was a conscious thing or a subconscious thing, but it really bugged me because, you know, I converted for me, not for a man. You know, I have spiritual needs, you know, I'm my own individual. And it really bugged me as in, right, so now that you can see that I'm married, what does that mean for you? That I've taken this religion seriously, or that I'm going to have kids and be part of this Muslim community? It really, I didn't tell anybody this, but it really, really annoyed me. I found it incredibly patronizing. And it is patronizing. It felt like I wasn't taken seriously as an individual. And it wasn't until people could visibly see this man that was like, oh yeah, khalas, now part of the club. Yeah. That's something that really irritated me.
Yeah, that's not personal. That's just typical. That's just the way that women are generally treated, or unmarried women. Once you're married, then you become legit. And then, there's like that respect factor because you're attached to a man now. So yeah, don't take that personally. That's how we're all treated. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, it was my first experience of being married, so I didn't have any kind of reference point before that. So yeah.
And when we spoke earlier, you made a really interesting point about the loneliness of becoming a convert. And that's a really interesting point that I'd like you to speak on a little bit, because because this isn't my experience, that's not something I really thought about. But you would feel lonely, because I'm born and raised in this very tight-knit community. I'm going to the Islamic school. My mother is, the head of the Islamic studies at the school. So everybody knows her, everybody knows me, everybody knows each other. It's a very, very tight-knit community. And then you join in as an adult where these people have probably known each other forever. And also there's probably ethnic groups as well.
Yeah.
So you've got all the Pakistanis hanging out, all the Arabs hanging out. And then you're kind of like not really sure where to fit in. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about that.
I say was because now I've kind of got to a place where we'll talk about that later. So I'm going to say was. I mean, it still is, but I kind of moved past it. It was very, very lonely. I mean, on the one hand, I've made some incredible friends, like very few in this area, but that are literally like family to me, that would invite me for Eid, etc. But, I would like to think that if you had a family and you saw somebody converted and didn't have a family to spend Eid with, that you would invite them. But the lack of invitation there, or I'm sat at an iftar and people are speaking their own language right next to me and completely ignore me. That is so rude. Sorry, so rude. If there's a language barrier, okay, but, there's still communication. Like, I'm sorry, there's no excuse. It was very lonely, and obviously the fact that my husband was abroad, there's not a big Maghreb community in the UK at all, and especially where I was. It was lonely, very, very lonely. And, you kind of have this expectation of Eid's going to be the new Christmas. And it's upsetting. But I still have some amazing friends. And it does make a difference because while, your faith should be personal about you and God, it does make a difference if you're feeling lonely and left out. Like this Eid was one of the first Eids I'd spent in a while with friends. And it made such a difference spending Eid with this friend. And I felt like, and a friend that also accepts me for who I am and doesn't, question my faith. And that really, really helped a lot. But generally, I've always felt a lot more at home with Muslims abroad than in the UK. I find the British Muslim community very conservative, except I love being interfaith spaces, Muslim interfaith spaces I love. But generally, I don't have that little cultural hub. The Turkish community, I generally think are great, getting really well with them. I'm not connected to the Maghreb community here. I found that they also behave differently here to abroad. There was incidents where I felt that one Maghrebi woman in the community where I was based was very rude. My husband was invited to spend some time with their husband, and she didn't even invite me.
Oh,
that would be impossible in Algeria. Algeria is like my home,
Yeah.
So there's a disconnect between Muslims overseas, Muslims here, where theoretically, culturally, I may have more in common here, but just the dynamic was completely different. My lived experiences were overseas, not here in terms of relating to Muslims and Muslim community. So obviously some very positive experiences here. I don't want to sort of demonize the whole community, but it is very lonely. I suppose the expectation that she'll just have somewhere to go, I don't know. And then the struggle that even when I was married, my husband missed his family overseas. So Eid wasn't always a particularly happy time. I said the best Eid I had was recently after going to visit a friend, the best Eid I'd had for years, to be honest. So it's Muslim community and culture is a lot about family. And while I love my family, they're not going to celebrate Eid in the same way. So it depends how you interpret it. Which is why I've taken a lot more from Christmas now, that actually that's maybe my thing, because that's how I've been brought up and that is my family and that's something they relate to. So I can maybe enjoy Christmas a lot more and share that with Eid rather than just focusing on Eid, which was lovely. I spent Christmas with my family this year and it was great, and that is where I belong. So it's been an interesting journey. I would say generally being a convert depends on the people that you meet and the experiences, but it can be very, very lonely.
You also touched on something. I can empathize. You touched on a very important topic, something that I brought up a little bit in my book about when I said being born and raised in Canada, I'm in this very conservative community. I feel like I'm in like a bubble of Sharia. And then I go to Egypt and suddenly I'm introduced to belly dancing. Like people are listening to music, women aren't wearing hijab. Like it was just shocking because I expected my whole life, you know, when my mom would complain about the kuffar, the infidels in Canada and how Egypt is so much better. I had this idea in my head that Egypt was going to be so much more conservative than the community I'd grown up in. And yeah, I was so wrong. Egypt, when I was the first time I could breathe in many ways, you know, and it sounds like you're kind of saying the same thing. I mean, when you gave the example of not being invited to that woman's house, like just being Arab, North African, Algerian, Moroccan, any of these cultures are very, very generous, very open. So it would, like it would kill them. They would never, ever want anyone to ever feel like they don't feel 100% comfortable. I mean, I remember reading this very recently in Saudi Arabia. They go around and they just do census, like just asking people questions at the door. And the Saudi Arabian government had to release this plea to people: when the guy comes to your door to ask you census questions, please don't invite him in for coffee and lunch. He has a job to do.
Yeah, I love it.
He has a job to do, and he has lots of houses to get to. But as an Arab, there's no way you can have somebody standing at your door asking you questions. You have to invite him in. And obviously that's not the same when it's in Canada, America, the UK. Like once they become the diaspora community, their cultural elements go in the background, and it's all about being Muslim. And to be perfectly honest, which you may have felt a bit of this too, especially before you converted, there is a lot of us and them. There is a lot of not trusting the white people. There is a lot of they hate us, and so we have to hate them back, and a lot of that kind of rhetoric. So I think that sometimes, and quite often too, people convert and then they deconvert, you know, like they just stay in the community for a little bit and then they're like, whoa, sorry, changed my mind. I just read something I don't like or whatever. And so there is kind of like this period sometimes where there's a little bit of mistrust or something, but it's just so different from how it would be at home. And so I just wanted to, you know, I think that's really important that you brought up how people here are so much more conservative and it's so much Islam forward.
To the extent where people from overseas have told me how shocked they are by the level of extremism in the UK. Generally though, I don't feel the us and them thing, that's only with, you know, actual extremists and not the people I were with, but I think there isn't that cultural warmth in the same way as overseas. Where, I mean, I'm aware that obviously a culture and religion, where they overlap, etc. You know, I converted into religion, but I met it through a culture, and I can separate the two. Obviously, they overlap, and religion is, you know, interpreted through a culture, etc. But it's really through reconnecting again recently with Muslims from overseas that has given me confidence again, the non-judgmental attitude. Like I was really at a point where I possibly would have left Islam. But now it's actually connecting with Muslims overseas and them just accepting me as who I am and not judging me. And I'm sat with them and I'm drinking and they're not drinking and like they literally don't care. It's them that have really, really helped me, as well as the people I do have in the UK, to kind of accept and be confident in me as a Muslim, and that's it. So yeah, I struggle with the British Muslim community here, but you know, there's some amazing people as well. I work with so many British Muslims in terms of, you know, doing interfaith stuff. So I don't want to I'm not trying to demonize.
Oh, of
but
course.
I have struggled with the community in this country.
Yeah,
I
hear
think
that
it's
a
very,
lot.
overall very conservative, and as you said, I think diaspora communities tend to invert inwards and become more conservative, rather, you know, when you go to Egypt and Algeria, in some ways they might be more conservative because, you know, the expectations in terms of alcohol and sexual relations are completely different to the mainstream culture here, where maybe people hide or, you know, interweave. But generally in other ways they're so much more relaxed, you know, like they don't obsess about is alcohol in their mouthwash, they'll have gelatin in their, you know, medication. There's just a so much more nuanced view that, you know, I have OCD, and the level of religiosity in this country, there's some certain elements that can really, I just think are really, really unhealthy psychologically, rather in overseas, I'm so much more at peace with it. So, you know, some people might think, oh, but isn't the Middle East, North Africa really conservative? No, a lot of the ways in the where they practice their faith, when you remove the politics, when you remove everything else, it's just so much more natural. And that is the Islam that I fell in love with.
Yeah, yeah. It is surprising for people to hear that, but yeah, that's been my experience as well. So tell me about how you got involved in all of this interfaith work. This was after you got divorced, I assume?
No, before the divorce.
Before, okay, great. And how did he feel about all of your, because you're very much against anti-Semitism. You work with the Muslims Against Anti-Semitism UK. You're a very strong voice against that kind of hate. How did the Muslim community react to you taking on that kind of work?
Oh, I could talk for hours. So just stop me if I'm talking too much. So it really happened that when I moved abroad to Spain, me and my husband were living together, and that was his first experience outside of Algeria, living outside in Europe. But mainland Europe is very different to the UK in terms of identity and integration. I just want to point that out there. And this was my first time living as a hijabi woman abroad. And like when I'd been doing my Erasmus year and I was just like, you know, a 21-year-old non-Muslim drinking, doing the whole student thing. So, and, you know, I was angry because of the way that I had visa issues with my husband, and I was pretty conservative at this point, you know, and at the same time, he was sort of like examining religion and politics. It was all that time of like Daesh and everything. So we were living in Spain, and it was an interesting time because I was visibly Muslim with the headscarf, but also, you know, quite visibly European. And I had this kind of like weird cultural privilege that, you know, I was teaching the language that they all had to learn, whether they liked it or not, English. It was kind of like a legal requirement. And my husband at the time was not visibly Muslim, but was North African. And there's some bad blood there in terms of like how Spain looks at the past and also commemorates things. So it was kind of interesting, like the different struggles that we'd face in terms of discrimination, in terms of jobs, how I was getting work, but I'd be questioned about my headscarf. He got work, but was told, you can't be doing this job because you're not supposed to. And it was like, well, I have the legal right to do this. Why not? Different kind of experiences of prejudice. And it really made me think about kind of my identity, where I kind of fitted in as a convert. I'd been doing an interview with somebody who was kind of researching converts and looking at kind of, you know, how we like between the two cultures. It made me reflect. And he was also reflecting on, you know, he said to me once, this is what Europe is like. And I said, no, this is where we are at the moment. It's like Britain's very different. So, and he said to me, you know, these are important experiences that you should kind of work on. And I was looking for writing experience. And so I started a blog and started writing. And it was also the time of Trump. So writing and reflecting about being a Muslim, like in the West, etc., just reflecting on all these issues. Moved back to the UK, and I'd always been interested in kind of like social justice and activism, but I wasn't really involved in interfaith things before, because I suppose I wasn't really involved in kind of like religious stuff before. And joined this Peace Festival planning committee, and I really, really enjoyed it, and it got me thinking about, you know, the importance of interfaith work. And then we both moved to London. And obviously, where I was living in the UK, I wasn't seeing many visibly Jewish people around. I'd met like the odd kind of colleague at uni. I was vaguely interested, but it wasn't really a thing. But now as a Muslim, I kind of had that theological link. And then out and about in London, I was seeing people, you know, like Hasidic Jews wearing hats, pale, etc. I was, you know, becoming more curious about this community, and thought it was a bit sad that I don't really know much about the Jewish community. Also trying to trace family Jewish heritage, which I'm still looking into. Not confirmed, it's just a hunch, long story. And so I just thought, you know what, I need to like get more involved. So I looked up some stuff online and found this really awesome Jewish Muslim women's group at a synagogue. Went there, it kind of overlapped at the same time with this Nishim Jewish Muslim Women's Network that I was getting involved with, and my friend bought me a ticket for the conference, and it all just kind of like merged to one, and I really loved it, and I just found like real purpose and belonging through it all. I really feel at home in interfaith spaces. Generally, the people are very open-minded, less judgmental. We're all about getting on together, you know, like a merge of cultures and religions. And it just became something that I was really interested in. I mean, in the past, I'd done kind of studies on anti-Semitism at uni in terms of like the Dreyfus Affair, books I was translating about anti-Semitism. So obviously my interest was there, but I also had this very like anti-Israeli stance. So I kind of compartmentalized the two things as different, you know, like being Jewish and being Israeli or whatever. But I was very open to the whole interfaith thing, despite my views on Israel. And it just kind of fitted. And I met amazing people. I learned so much. The work was just really inspiring. And it just grew from there. And in terms of the Muslim community, I mean, I'm not like a sort of pillar of the community. I'm not a spokesperson. But I was doxxed and trolled for all kinds of things, you know, views on Israel and stuff. But quite frankly, to use my language, don't really give a shit what Islamists think. At that point, it was either I back down or carry on, as my husband said at the time, and I wasn't going to back down. So yeah, carry on. Don't care what bigots think. I'm hoping that maybe I've inspired some people. I've learned a lot, and it's just become part of my life. And yeah, it's been amazing to be like sitting on Jewish services, events, make so many Jewish friends. Like, it's taught me a lot about my own faith, about life, and yeah, it's part of my life now, and it's really important to me.
I love that. I love everything that you just said. You know, like I mentioned at the beginning, we've known each other for quite a while, and I've been watching you blossom and grow, and it's been really beautiful. And I love hearing you speak like that. But you're absolutely correct. You know, like the Islamists, the extremists, the bigots, the haters, the violent misogynists. Why would we care what they have to say? We can't care what they have to say. But, you know, you got to just keep doing you. And that's what you're doing amazingly.
And it feels amazing. Not giving a shit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And it does. It's my favorite part. That was my absolute favorite part of getting away from my extremist family, is not having to give a shit anymore, because that weight is so heavy, especially on girls. But just like the family honor, and you have to, you know, just the hijab itself, like you said, you're identified as Muslim. It's like you've got this pink neon sign flashing on your head, you know, and so you're like this ambassador for Islam. Every single step you take, every single move you make, every
and I want to be
word
me
out of your mouth, you can't.
I just want to be
you.
me. And I'm lucky that I don't have that pressure from any side, because I don't have a Muslim family. Whatever their views would be pro. I've got no family in that sense to kind of, you know, I mean, obviously I was doing something way out there. My family might be like, oh, what are you doing? But, you know, I'm left to it. It's my own choice. I don't care what people think. And in terms of the Algerian family that I'm still very much connected to, obviously the dynamic's different, where I respect them and respect me, but there's no, you know, I'm not beholden to anybody. I'm totally free to do exactly what I like. Anything that's just like sane and legal and whatever. Yeah. And it's a great feeling.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I hope every woman and man gets to feel that. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to everyone else, because I'm sure there are a lot of questions.
Excuse the tissue, I'm still recovering from a cold, sorry.
Oh, okay, you're excused. I hope you start to feel better really soon.
Yeah, I'm on the mend.
Oh, good. So if you have any questions or comments for Liz, then please just, you know, unmute yourself or use the little hand icon, or somehow identify to me that you have something to say to Liz. Oh, sorry, I wasn't paying attention. My screen is in the way. Lois, please go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you, Liz, so much for giving us your story. But one of the things that made me curious is when you were seeking, you were looking when you were, what, late teens, 20s. I was recently in a discussion where we were talking about belief and choice. And I came out very strong. You can't choose to believe something. You either believe it or you don't. And I would like for you to, you know, talk more about when you were looking, what was choice and what was belief?
That's an interesting question, because obviously I chose to act on it in terms of identify and convert. But obviously I felt like there were kind of spiritual signs, and it was more a case of, am I going to embrace this or not embrace it? As in, my beliefs changed. Yeah, I didn't choose to believe. I believed, if that makes sense. Things happened, things made sense. And then it was really a case of, okay, how do I kind of move with this? How do I take, because it's quite a big step, you know, you're going to identify with something that's very different to, you know, everything that everyone knows you as. Yes, I felt, without trying to sound all kind of, it was gifted to me, kind of like things became clear. I wanted to find something, made an effort to go out and find it. Things became clear, there were signs there, and then it was about me moving with those signs. Yeah, but everything was a choice. I didn't have to do anything if I didn't want to. I hope that makes sense.
I'm mulling.
It's a tricky thing to explain because it's like a very, very personal thing, like physically sensing things and connecting with texts and like very, very personal spiritual things that you just feel like that is the answer. And then it's about, okay, I believe this. How am I going to kind of take on this journey? Hope that makes sense. It's a very, very personal answer. So I suppose it might be difficult to understand if not been through it.
Well, I guess I left Christianity, and I know a lot of people who did. Some people who'd give anything in the world if they could go back and believe it because they were happy then. I mean, they're happy now too, but I mean, they found their way. But they really
it wasn't
wanted.
easy. I struggled with it. I actually struggled. At one point, I thought it would be easy to be Christian. It was kind of like I had these beliefs, but I had to take this step to convert, to identify, to take this new journey. So it was the opposite. It would have been easier for me to be Christian, but I didn't believe in that anymore. So it's sort of the opposite. I hope that makes sense. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I understand a lot more now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Lois. Erkan.
Okay, thanks, and thanks, Liz. I'm also, I want to also kind of add to what Lois was saying, and because I'm always kind of astonished by people who convert to Islam, especially if they're Western, and especially if they're women, you know. I just find it, but you've explained the spiritual reasons and whatnot, so that's fine. I mean, as an atheist, I can't relate to that. I can't, that's a different headspace, so I can't understand it. But how do you feel about, I mean, I'm not just an atheist, I'm also, you know, a kind of a sociologist, and I find it interesting when you get these arguments about the place of women in Islam, which is one of the reasons why we do this podcast, of course, and one of the reasons why Yasmine is well known. So what are your thoughts about perceptions of Islam, you know, in the West? Because, for example, 𝗤𝗢𝗎𝗄 has written that, according to him, you know, women are third class in Islamic culture. It's not really about extremism or anything like that. It's written into the religion that women are actually third class behind hermaphrodites. It's actually written into the faith. But then on the other hand, as I said, you've got people like Karen Armstrong and Susan Buck-Morss, people like that who strongly, you know, strongly protest that kind of claim. And so, yeah, I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if I thought Islam was a misogynistic, I think it's semantically, I think it's important to differentiate between Islam in terms of what I believe is God and that kind of truth, as compared to Islam and Muslims as a sort of belief system that's lived through people. There's a big difference. Obviously, if I thought Islam was misogynistic, I wouldn't be a Muslim. I don't need to be a Muslim. I'm not going to be killed for apostasy. I live in the UK. Nobody cares. Like, my family just want me to be happy. I quite easily could have done that by now, but I stuck with it because I don't want people to ruin my beliefs. Obviously, I believed that Islam is egalitarian, but the way I believe that has changed. So I think it's very easy. They kind of look at the context about, you know, like how female infanticide was banned, all these positive changes at a really dark period. And that's very easy to use to be like, oh, look at this feminist religion. That is true. I do believe those things. But now I'm a lot more critical. I think, well, actually, like, you're looking at examples from decades, centuries ago, like, what are you doing now? But it's kind of packaged as, but at the time it did this, and sort of, you know, the world now isn't following it. But actually, I think that's just a really apologistic narrative, because what is the community doing now? So obviously I believed in those things in the spirit. And then over time, just kind of became more disillusioned with kind of how Muslim women are treated. And for example, the idea was proposed that, oh, like, but the headscarf is amazing because it's going to kind of like free you from this kind of like Western sort of sexualization of women. Now I have a completely different view. So the sort of thread is there, as me being this feminist woman, which I still am, is there, but obviously I've changed from which perspective I've seen it. And I think it's very easy to do the whole, you know, shout the whole, oh, but women are over-sexualized in the West. You know, or, you know, there's misogyny in every single culture. I'm sure there's misogyny in every single religion. It's a global problem. But to pick on it from that kind of anti-Western perspective and say, Islam gave us this, and then to fall into that world, well, actually, there's so many problems in the Muslim community and how women are treated. and a non-Muslim community as well, I think it's a bit of a kind of easy escape route to kind of bring women in, and then actually, well, like, what's happening? And then it's saying, well, you don't talk about that when she's a Muslim, though, how she's going to find it difficult to find a prayer space. They don't talk about, you know, all these other problems and things. So I think it's easy to bring them in, but actually, what are you doing to address those issues that are currently going on? So I've come in and now stay with the same mindset, but I'm a lot more critical now because I've lived through it. I've experienced the community, I've experienced the religion. And obviously that thread of, I believe that God believes I'm equal, just like every other human being, and being a woman is an amazing thing. I still believe that's the same God, but I try and sort of separate more what I think God is versus the way he, she, it, I don't know, I have a pronoun, is presented by Muslims and the Islamic doctrine, if that makes sense. That's quite a long answer. I mean, I could talk about this for hours. For example, like the headscarf thing, I was completely in love with it and now I think it's awful. But as a convert, I think it's almost got this kind of allure that, yeah, it was the sort of, oh, but you're not going to be sexualized like they are in the West anymore. You're going to have everyone will focus on your brains and your intellect. And now, as always packaged, now I look at it and think, wow, that was like completely the opposite. But you don't have the lived experience of it. So you're only seeing it from a certain angle. And yeah, I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I will say I don't think that God is a misogynist, but I do think that the way that Muslim women are treated varies between communities, cultures, countries. There's some really awful, and there's some people that are a lot more open-minded. So I won't want to make generalized statements, but obviously there's some issues. But it depends. Like in the UK, it may just be a case of, you know, lacking spare space and that kind of spiritual equality. In other countries combine, and I'm not going to say it's just politics because I think that's an excuse again, is people's actual interpretation of the faith. I think it's annoying how people just go, oh, that's just culture. Well, where do you define a religion or culture when a religion is interpreted through a culture? You know, there are problems with how Islam is practiced overseas and also in pockets in the UK. So I think it's a massive topic that I could talk about for hours.
So one of the things, sorry, if I can just
yeah.
So one of the things you're saying is that prior to wearing the headscarf, you believed, you were told by friends in the Muslim community that it kind of it takes away that kind of objective
yes.
the male, the gaze of the objectivity. Like
when the irony is, it does exactly the same thing because it's looking at you only as, you know, if a band can't look at you without, it's funny. It's exactly the same thing, but just packaged in a different way.
Well, it's one of the things that a Freudian or a cultural studies kind of professor might say, that we sexualize when we wrap an object for Christmas. Yes. When we make it a gift, it's a kind of it's a symbolic kind of sexualization.
Yes, it has exactly the same. It's exactly the same. You're going from, oh, I don't want to just be seen as this whatever. And actually, I don't think the West does, you know, sexualize in advertisements, but I think generally we can't generalize. People respect people. You're right. It has exactly the opposite effect. It takes away individualism. It basically reverts me to as a sexual being. I mean, we're all sexual, but as a person that primarily, you know, I have to kind of modify my physical and sexual kind of being for other people. It does exactly the opposite. Yeah, you're right. It does exactly the opposite.
So there's sorry, Erica, are you good?
No, it's fine. Go ahead. Thanks. Fine.
There's a very long comment here from Sahara that I'm going to read out. And I want to hear your responses to it, and then I want to respond to it as well. So here we go.
I can speak to. Hi, sorry,
okay,
I have a cold, so I thought maybe. How are you, everybody? Hi, thank you for Yasmine for having another episode, amazing episode. Hi, Liz, thank you for coming and telling your story. Yeah, you know, I am fascinated with people who leave, you know, other ideology, especially more like Christianity, and then become, you know, enjoying Islam. I mean, what really did you know? Because I've met people who convert this Islam when I was in it, and they used to actually tell me like, oh, Islam is, you know, this and that, and hijab is a choice, or, you know, things like that. And these people are born here from United States. And I used to say, like, I came from a Muslim country. If you remove hijab, you know, you could be killed. You can't even leave Islam. There's apostasy. And they didn't know that. So when you were enjoying Islam, did you know apostasy, do you know, like, were you aware of, a child marriage? I know you can say, like, you probably say that's not in the Quran, but were you aware of the practices such as, the Sharia law? So I'm just curious about individuals who are enjoining this ideology, especially the Western.
I'm going to be brutally honest.
Sorry.
I was aware of all of those things, but came from, again, the angle of that's not Islam and God, that's people behaving badly angle. Now I say that's too simplistic. Obviously, I don't believe that's in the name of God, because why would I follow that? I could easily leave Islam. I believe that that's people using culture, religion, their interpretation of religion, and I believe it's sick. I'm going to have to say this, I'm just going to be honest. I did believe in the whole concept of Sharia law in terms of, capital punishment, which is pretty messed up considering I came from a human rights background, and that's something I really struggled with. I think the idea that, it's more sort of preventative and wouldn't actually happen. But obviously there's a struggle there in terms of I'm coming from like a very secular human rights background. And I suppose the answer would always be, yeah, that's just misinterpreted, or that's extremism, or, that's not what God is, etc. Rather now I'd be like, hang on a minute, like, can we actually discuss this, please? And I do think there's a naivety of Muslims in the West who haven't been brought up in countries where like a version of Sharia is practiced. I think there's a naivety and there's a disingenuity, because it's, why aren't you speaking up for women that are abused? Like, if you don't believe that's your faith, then why wouldn't you speak out about that?
Mhm.
Why? And it seems to me that perhaps you think it is then, or you're confused, because I would always have spoken up against those things. Even as like a fully hijabi Muslim, I was like, FGM's wrong. I would publish about how wrong FGM was, child marriage, all of those things. It was never an issue, because how could I ever support any of those things? I wouldn't become a Muslim if I thought they were, genuine. So, it was just that's not Islamically sanctioned. Rather now, I would be even more critical and say, hang on a minute, to some of those people, those are Islamically sanctioned, and that's where we've got to dismantle like the theological narratives, rather than just go, that's just cultural practice. Again, because where do you draw the line between religion and culture? So I think, as you said, perhaps some people just aren't aware, they're just innocently living their lives, but most people do just want to get on with their lives and practice their faith, But I do come from an activist background where I'm aware of these issues. So before I would have been that's not Islam, this is Islam, that's terrible. Now I'm going to be more critical and I'm going to talk about those things. And it really, really bugs me. You've got days like, what's it called, hijab day thing. Why, first of all, are we promoting something which I find inherently misogynistic? But okay, protecting women from harassment is one thing, but why are we promoting it? And secondly, if we're actively promoting it, why haven't you got a day supporting Iranian women who are imprisoned? I tend to be like, the Muslim community is very vocal when it comes to being oppressed by people who are not Muslim, but they have no voice except people who have lived experience abroad, which is why another reason why I feel more at home with Muslims from Muslim majority countries from overseas, because they have those real experiences, even though people often try and shut them down. Somebody may have a wonderful experience of being free in Canada or the UK, but that doesn't negate somebody else's experience. And I think it's really tricky with this whole debate on what is Islamophobia, etc. I think people have to be real and open. And if you have faith, and if you really believe that your faith is real, you shouldn't feel threatened by that being questioned. Sorry, I got a bit angry there, but it really bugs me. Sorry.
It's okay, thank you. Because I went to college here, and what I noticed at the university is that the Islam is being taught is sugar-coated and cherry-picked.
Well, it's dangerous because you can't sugarcoat things. You have to be honest with yourself. It's not helping anybody. It's not helping those Muslims, and it's not helping the women overseas. And also, like, not just women, but like, gay people trying, it's not helping anybody. And I think it's really naive, and it's not going to push things forward. It's just going to repeat this, Islam's perfect, and we're in the West able to live that perfect life because we've got all the freedoms, versus this terrible thing that for some people is what Islam is. Whether it is or isn't theologically, it's definitely seen as interpretation of Islam. The Islamic regime in Tehran definitely, well, at least some people definitely believe that's what Islam is. I clearly don't. So I think people have to be honest, and they're not being honest.
Absolutely. And we have to be able to have this uncomfortable conversation and talk about the issue within the community, because these people don't want to talk about,
what are they scared of then? What are they scared of? Actually confronting their beliefs? I'm at total peace in my head. I've got no, there was a point actually where I would sort of stop questioning in my head and I was scared. And I think that's the kind of cultish element of certain strands of orthodoxy. I do not have any of that now. I'm at total peace mentally. I don't have to prove to anybody. I don't have to believe something to therefore make my relationship valid, my being Muslim. But that's the thing. It's those elements of control about, well, if you question that, you're not Muslim. Once you let go of that, then you're able to actually think freely and rationally. I'm not saying Muslims don't think rationally, I don't want people to take it out of context, but you know what I'm saying? There's that element of fear there. I don't have any fear about any of it now because I have nobody to answer to except myself and God. So I think there's a denial there and there's a naivety there.
Yes, and I think I think Yasmine said this before, and I was actually thinking this because she says, sometimes Yasmine says what I'm thinking too, because a lot of people, in my opinion, when you're in the ideology of Islam, it really thinks for you because you can't question, you can't critical thinking. So most people are thinking. It doesn't mean they don't have a brain. It's just they can't think aloud because they're afraid, or you're not allowed to think for yourself because Islam,
you have to seek answers from other people, and it's very unhealthy psychologically, very unhealthy, because you're essentially living in this box where, add OCD to that, I'm sure it made my OCD worse, or they fed off each other. Add into that box, very real, scary things can become very real based on intentionality. I'm not saying the religion thinks this, but certain strands plus, OCD, etc. Very real things can become, very real based on what's your intentionality. It's like, you're not living in sort of like the physical world anymore. It's this kind of ideological world of this is wrong, this is right, this will happen, this will happen. It's not healthy psychologically.
Absolutely. And I want to add, thank you so much for that. I'm sorry for the experience. I have experienced one time I was at the mosque and then these ladies were speaking Arabic. I and another person were not praying. So they kicked us, and because we were haram, we were not praying because, when you have your period, you don't supposed to go. Some Muslim believe that you don't supposed to.
Well, I'm not sure I believe in any of that, to be honest.
Yeah,
because,
that. And then this lady was speaking Arabic. So I understand the rudeness of when somebody doesn't, they don't understand the language you speak. Just speak English if you can. And I'm sorry you have to experience that, people speak in another language and then you were in there. I mean, I can relate it to that. And I think it's very rude, and it's just
luckily I've met some amazing people and I've met some very rude people. I try and see everything as an experience. What can I learn from it? What can I gain from it? And it's maybe the person I am today. So it's all good.
Absolutely. And thank you for speaking. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for being honest.
Congratulations for your freedom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sahara. So I just wanted to comment that, Sahara, you and I, Leora as well, anybody who grew up in either a Muslim majority country or in an Islamic household, our experiences would be totally different than Liz's. Like she is—
I'm aware of that. Yeah. And I think a lot of people aren't.
Yeah, like she made the decision to join Islam first and foremost. We never got that choice. She chose it because it made sense to her. It spoke to her. She was comfortable with it. We never got the opportunity to do that. We were never given that space, that choice. And then also for her to say, I'm not going to wear hijab anymore, or I'm going to drink alcohol, or I'm going to start dating. I don't know if you're doing these things, Liz. I'm just making examples.
All of it.
Okay.
Doing all the haram.
So all the haram things.
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't believe it's haram. This is where it makes me not a hypocrite. There's so many people that will
but you're allowed to
and want to
do
hide
that.
them. Because I make my own decisions about what's moral. I'm not going to make this like weird, hypocritical, well, I feel like I should do this, but I'm going to hide and feel guilty. No. No. So I just want to point that out. I don't think anything I do is haram. Yeah.
I think that's wonderful, and I celebrate you for that. And like I said, I hope every man and woman gets to feel that same freedom. But what I'm trying to express here is that when we grow up in these families, when we grow up in these communities, we don't get to make those choices again. We can't say, one day suddenly, oh, I don't feel like wearing hijab anymore, and then there won't be any life-threatening consequences as a result of that. Or your family could disown you. That would be the very least of things that could happen to you. There's a lot of really atrocious— our situations are totally different. So the fact that you're able to live comfortably with Islam the way you want it to be, what you choose the parts that you want to follow and you disregard the parts that you don't want to follow, that is a privilege. And it's a
Oh yeah,
privilege that,
I'm aware that's an immense privilege. Yeah, I'm aware.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm
aware.
happy to see that there are a lot of Muslims, both in the West and not in the West, that are starting to do that more and more. I can especially see it with women pushing for feminist, pushing for like, I'm feminine, pushing for not getting, pushing for criminalizing marital rape, for example, for criminalizing spousal abuse, you know, like we're talking about like baby steps, but still for women to push against these things, for women to push against child marriage, you know, these kinds of things, the mullahs push back in Pakistan and Iran, and you know, they'll say, well, our prophet married a 6-year-old, so who are you to try and make this age now that it has to be 18? You know, when we talk about,
it scares me that people actually believe that. It scares me that people
all
actually
of this
believe
stuff
that.
exists. So it's like women, I can see women and men and, you know, Muslims are now pushing for more of a Islam that they can feel comfortable with, so that they can maintain their community, maintain their family, maintain that tribalness that is so important for human beings. And I get that. I understand that they want to have their cake and eat it too. And for those who can do that, for those who are in families or in societies or in whatever, they're in environments where they have the privilege to do that, that's fantastic and that's wonderful. And I wish them all the best. But most of us did not have that opportunity. We did not have that choice. I think
it's their responsibility to not give a one-sided perception. And I think it's also all our responsibility to support the women that don't have those choices. Because not only do people who don't know enough about these experiences, it kind of perpetuates the idea that it's all fluffy and rosy, which it's not. Those women need our support. So no, I'm aware that I've got immense privilege and I'm thankful for that. And I know that. And I'm very conscious of that, very conscious of that.
And I do too, right? Like I think just this morning, I was looking at the Taliban in Afghanistan dancing in an empty girls' classroom because they're so happy that they can, oh my God, it just gets me so upset, because if it were not for the flutter of a butterfly's wing, any one of us could have been one of those Afghani girls
that scares me. It really scares me.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it scares me. Yeah, the immense difference between my life and somebody else's. Yeah, it's
you're
big.
Absolutely correct about the responsibility. It is our responsibility.
There is a responsibility.
Say, why don't you be quiet? Why don't you stop? Why you're putting your family in danger? Blah, blah, blah. I have no choice. I'm compelled to do this. You know, do you think that a woman in Afghanistan, you're going to hear her voice as soon as she goes out to protest against something, right? She's going to disappear. And if it's not from her government, it's going to be from her family. How
and
often
the apparent
are we
ummah
reading?
That we're all part of? Yeah, if we're all part of this ummah, then why aren't they speaking out? I'm sorry,
Nobody
why
cares.
aren't they speaking out?
Nobody
as a human being, as a Muslim, as everything. Whether even if I wasn't Muslim, I would still care. But all of these people, why aren't they saying or doing anything?
No.
If anything, it's like taking the good and enjoying the good and leaving the others to suffer. It's hypocrisy. It's complete hypocrisy.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And what you said before too was absolutely true, with they'll only speak out if it's a non-Muslim who's doing something. So like in India, where they had a school uniform that didn't allow girls to wear the burqa. Oh my God, you heard about it all over. Muslims in India wouldn't stop talking about it. But what about all of these girls in Afghanistan that none of them are allowed to go to school? Not a peep. So do you
it's
really
all
care
identity
about
politics? Because what would God care about more? A piece of clothing, which I don't think he even calls for, or the freedom to actually be educated and liberated? They don't understand what faith is about, and it's pure hypocrisy, and it really just makes me so livid.
Yeah, and I don't know if you knew about this, but there was a school in Saudi Arabia, a girls' school, where the school was set on fire, and the firefighters refused to bring the girls out because they weren't in proper hijab. 15 girls burned to death in this building.
That is pure idiocy.
Yes.
That's not the Islam that I was
so many stories.
Yeah,
I get that.
Sick.
But again, if you're a girl in Saudi Arabia going to this girls' school, like, you don't have that choice. You don't have the privilege to say, I denounce these parts of the religion and I only want to follow these parts, because you're living under Sharia.
Yeah.
Leora, you grew up in Saudi Arabia, right? You had the religious police that were going to come around and tell you what to do and what not to do. You don't. Yeah, so it's a complete.
Yeah, if I was living in Iran, if I did any of this stuff public, I'd probably be killed by now, let's be honest. I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
I'm totally aware of it. And it makes me appreciate my freedom almost more. And not just because I'm Muslim, but as like the activist I've always been, I always want to stick up for those women. And I think people care more about the image of a God that doesn't need protecting and their view of what faith is, which isn't what faith is, let's be honest, than actually supporting the people that they propose to care about, which they really don't, let's be honest.
Yeah. And I also really respect and appreciate that you're using your freedom to speak up for others, because that's what's really important. You're not just saying, well, I get to live the Islam that I want to live the way that I want to live it, and just ignoring everything else, but you're actively involved in interfaith activities. You're actively involved in fighting against the anti-Semitism that is rampant in the Islamic community, especially in the British Muslim communities. So, you know, I really appreciate that you're using your freedom for good. That's the quote that I have on my Twitter, which is the function of freedom is to free someone else. And that is exactly what you're doing.
Otherwise, it's just selfish. Otherwise, it's just selfish. I'm not doing enough, but I'm only one person. If there's any more things I can do to help, I would love to do more about women's overseas. But, well, otherwise, it's just selfish. It's like saying, I deserve one thing and other people don't. I mean, that's just not normal. That's not normal. It wasn't me before I converted to Islam, and it's not me now.
That's great. Leora, I'm sorry. Did I cut you off? Are you going to say something?
Oh, no, you didn't. You didn't. I was just saying, I was agreeing to what you said in regards of, hi, Liz, sorry. Thank you for sharing your story with us today. I feel really inspired to hear your story. But as Yasmine said, it's really hard for the women in the Arab world, the Muslim world. It's difficult. It's not as easy as how you see it. And especially the part when you said that your ex-husband accepted you just the way you are. So
well,
for
we
men,
had struggles when I started to change.
I'm talking about the religion part, that you're Christian.
Oh, yeah.
Muslim.
Yeah.
But part of accepting who you are is going to be not trying to change you in any way, where he's going to come one day and say, hey, how about you wearing the hijab? Or
he never did that, thankfully. He never did that, thankfully.
The children, when they grow up, they're going to be raised under the Sharia law, you know?
I'm very lucky with the man that I married.
Yeah. So
very lucky.
Not with everyone. She's from the Western culture, they will treat her differently and she would have more freedom. But if she was Muslim and from an Arab background, she's treated in a really
this is why for a long time I was triggered and would completely avoid Arab and Muslim men. Now I'm at a point where I'm able to think more. I've got over a bit of the anxiety, so I'm objectively able to. It's not specifically
it's a
what
healthy
I'm
anxiety.
I would like a partner of any nationality.
Hang on
but
to
yeah,
that.
I'm at a point where I can kind of try and look at the person as an individual, not just be triggered by the fact of their background. But obviously, I would have specific questions and concerns because I don't want a relationship based on a religion, and how would that form the dynamics? But yeah, I'm a happier place, but that took time, therapy and time.
Yeah. Exactly, and I hope women will understand one day that they just need to have that strength to stand up for themselves. But
they have the strength, but people try and crush it.
Well,
it's always in them.
The fact that they follow.
They're not taught.
They call themselves, they're Muslims, right? And when you're Muslim, you should, when you follow any religion, you should just follow that religion, or else you just create your own religion, right? So hijab and everything else is in Quran. Just like the Surah An-Nisa, for example, if your wife doesn't sleep with you, you have the right to beat her up. You do other things, but then you beat her up. It's in Quran, so you can't just change that and say, oh, I'm not.
We're going to have to agree to disagree, because I don't believe any of those things are true, because I would not stay in a religion. I couldn't stay in a religion where I thought, I don't like that, I'll just ignore it. I don't believe any of those things are theologically valid. If I did, I would have left Islam by now. I'm not going to make excuses for religion, but still be in it. So we're going to have to agree to disagree on that. But I get what you're saying in terms of that's what a lot of people
I just find it interesting because it's in the Quran. So if someone is following,
well, there's a lot to be said for interpretation. And also I just want to point out, I don't take the Quran as like a verbatim word for word text from God.
Well,
I think there comes to be a point where you have to do that, or you're just apologizing and ignoring things. I don't take it as literally everything.
I see. Someone in their world are trying to fight that as well. some
Because there
ayat.
comes a point where there's only so many things you can say, contextual, historical, blah, blah, blah. I'm at a point where I take it as like an inspiration, but it's not going to literally dictate rules and word by word. Because how many times can you reinterpret a word? Sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's it. It's really hard for them, and I wish them freedom.
Yeah.
As well. So,
Yeah, it is. It is. And it makes it all the more sad. Yeah.
So much.
Yeah, well,
Can I
we
say
get,
one more thing?
oh, of course, Sahara.
Yes,
Let me just
Liz,
say
I
this one sentence
understand.
first and then.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to add to Leora what she was saying is that those of us who are raised in Islam are raised with a learned helplessness. And so we don't feel that we are strong enough to speak for ourselves because we don't
So
even
I realized that
believe
after I said it, I was seeing it from my perspective. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. You're not
no,
taught to,
that's okay. Yeah. But we are strong, but we don't even know it ourselves. You know,
Exactly.
it takes a long time before we even start to recognize, hey, wait a minute, maybe I am smart, maybe I am capable, maybe I am courageous, you know, but it's you have to undo so much conditioning
almost like
before you can get there.
infantilization of women, how like they're able to hold an
Absolutely.
entire house, but they're so like you take a university student from the UK versus one in say Algeria, and like the level of independence, like the difference is shocking. How they're able to cope with situations, how they're they've been brought up that way. So I realized when I said it was
dependent.
that's a very Western perspective of seeing it in terms of if you're not brought up with those kind of skills. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Sahara. I just wanted to get that
It's
out.
okay. No, Liz, you know, we can agree to disagree and still see each other, you know, the humanity in, you know, regardless of our disagreement. However, we need to acknowledge that, you know, there's something wrong with the Quran and it's being practiced. You know, yes, I get it. You chose this ideology. I'm okay. I respect you. You know, you choose to practice some part. You choose not to practice some part. You know, I respect you. You remove your hijab. You're courageous. However, we need to acknowledge, yes, the surah about the hijab, the beating, is right there. And it's not like cherry picking. It's not interpretation. But you can disagree with us because, you know, but still see the respect that I respect you as a human being. But we need to acknowledge, and I think the problem with Islam and the Muslim community is the denial. We can't continue to deny. So we have to acknowledge and stop saying like, oh no, you're cherry picking. No,
I agree on the denial. I agree on the denial.
I'm not saying you're denying, but we need to acknowledge there's something wrong with Islam. You know, there's something
I believe there is
fundamentally. Yes, so I get it. I respect you. You know, you're an amazing person. Power to you. You know, but the reality of Islam is not like we, you know, not everybody, even the Western, we have grown ups like, you know, women's and men who are living, you know, quote in the closet because they're fearful to come up to their family to say that they left Islam because they're afraid. Isn't there something wrong with fundamentally this ideology? Yes. So we have to acknowledge the root of the problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I believe you're right. There isn't just a problem of fundamentalism. There is actually a fundamental problem with how Islam is practiced. I would say we need reform. You would say scrap the faith. So that's where we disagree. But no, I'm not going to pretend everything's fine because there are issues. I mean, I don't believe in the verse about beating your wife. I don't believe in that interpretation. And I'd even get to the point where I would just scrap the verse entirely. People who believe that the Quran 100% word for word is the word of God, they're going to come up with problems because how many times can you misinterpret or reinterpret or try and contextualize something? So I do agree there is a problem with the way that Islam is practiced. Again, I don't believe there's a problem with God in that sort of sense of Islam, but the system that we have now, I believe there's a problem with it. And I believe that there's so many billions of peaceful Muslims and for Muslims, but they're probably not like, you know, adhering to all of the for example, like Daesh, for example, they don't make stuff up. They interpret things based on text. They don't pick things out of nowhere. So, which is why I have another reason, a problem with when people say, oh, but they're not Islam, they're not Muslims, they're not, you know, no, they are living what they believe is an actual version of their faith. And I think you're right. People have to be honest and open about it. And we can't just dismiss extremism as a sort of end of the scale. That, you know, there's a scale. You don't just get from like A to B. Which is why another thing about non-violent extremism in this country is something I think it really, really needs to be like acknowledged further. You don't just get from one point to the other. So yeah, we're going to disagree on kind of what the problem is or how it should be addressed. But I just want to say, you know what? I feel like very much at home with ex-Muslims because I feel like there's not so much of a space for like reformist liberal Muslims, but with you guys, you'll just say it as it is. So yeah, while we'll disagree on what Islam is, should be, or can be, we share a lot in common. I'll just say that we share a lot in common. I'm not here to make excuses, but I'm not here to say that my religion is wrong. I think there's elements that need to be changed, misinterpreted, and reformed. Because if I did think it was just messed up, why would I be a Muslim? So,
Yes, and
yeah.
at least it's okay people to say Islam is wrong. It's okay to people.
Yeah, you can. You're right to say whatever you like, as long as you don't.
And I say Momo is Mohammed. I say no to Momo if I want to say
and
that.
That is
I can say,
right, and I will fight to the end for you to be able to say that.
and I still see you. I don't care. Even if you want to reform Islam, power to you. But what I wanted is honest conversation. We need to stop denying in the community. We need to be okay to address the root of the problem. And that's the problem. We deny and point and finger in the wrong way, instead, fixing our own problem and acknowledging what's really in the book, because we blame culture. I mean, look, Yasmine is not from the same culture. I'm Somali culture, even though I live in the United States and I love the country that I live. And, we were born into the ideology. We never had the choice, which you had the option.
And that makes me so sad.
To pick which party you want to pick and which party you don't want to follow. We never had that option, because for us, the Islam that we were raised and we were born is you completely be 100% Muslim. And to be a Muslim is to fit that, like it's kind of a puzzle. You have to fit in, and if you don't fit in, then you are out. And for us, like, the way we free, I mean, it took a long time. It's a long process. And it's just, I just couldn't rationalize after, I studied. But if you want to be, I don't care. If you want to really reform Islam, power to you. But people are going to criticize. People are going to say, yes, the fact is the wife beating is right there. You can cherry pick whatever you wanted. But we just have to acknowledge and work together. At the end of the day, we all humans. And I think we want to respect it and love. And thank you so much.
And I don't look at ex-Muslims as like ex-Muslims as category. You're just another person, like I'm another person. I don't look in a prism like that. I just want to make that clear. And also, whilst I would like reform, I just want to concentrate on myself and my life. I'm not here to like create a new Sharia council. I just want to be able to live my faith, and I'll fight for all of those things. But as an activist, I'm not here to change the Muslim community. I know where to put my energy, and I don't want to be this religious reformer. I just personally, I'm able to be me, and I still want to just be an activist to support all the people, whether they're Muslim or not Muslim, around the world, to live their lives the way they want to live. I'm not here to formally change Islam, because I need to know where to put my energy, and that's not my role really, and it's not what I'm interested in. I'm spiritual, but I'm not kind of dogmatic or religious. I'm not big on organized religion. I know where I want to put my energy.
Yes, Liz, and one more thing, I also don't see Muslim community as a Muslim. I just see them as a human being, and just matter as we are all matter, because we all matter, So
the part of this thing has been, I just want to be me, and that happens to be Muslim. I don't want to identify as this big Muslim person. I am me, and that's a really important lesson. But sending lots of love to you.
What a wonderful world this would be if we could all just do that. Let people be who they want to be. Let people, dress the way they want to dress, believe what they want to believe, pray to who they want to pray to, not pray to who they don't want to pray to. You know what I mean? Just mind your own business. That's really what it comes down to, because that was the thing with a lot of us who denounced Islam. It was this intolerance that's what pushed us. I mean, my experience was that it was hijab, but for other people, it's different things. For my cousin, who will be coming on Forgotten Feminists as well, it was because she fell in love with a Jewish man. There's going to be some sort of trigger that's going to make your family or your community just denounce you. Even if you haven't denounced Islam, they will denounce you because you took one step in the wrong direction. And actually, we had a Forgotten Feminist who talked about exactly this. She's from Saudi Arabia. So, you're following a 𝗁صراط المستقيم, right? It's that really long, thin tightrope with the hell burning underneath you. And if you just misstep,
just like to point out, I don't
tightrope,
believe in hell. I don't believe in a fiery hell at all. So that's obviously they can't use that on me. So I don't believe in that. I believe hell's a situation you create in your own mind by being a shitty person.
That's, what? That's wonderful, Liz. But I just want to say that I think it's the intolerance that we had with not allowing people to believe what they wanted to believe can sometimes continue even when you become an atheist, where you can have sort of an intolerance to people believing what you think are irrational beliefs or things that you disagree with. And I think that there's
trauma. Yeah.
It is trauma, but it takes time, and it takes getting rid of a lot of anger, and it takes maturity, and it takes understanding human nature and knowing that all of us are so different and we have so many different needs. And for so many conversations I've had that have enlightened me to the fact that people are willing to accept all sorts of, subjugation and whatnot, if they get to be part of a community, if they get to be part of a tribe, if they get that, if it fulfills them at such a deep, deep level.
Yes, and I think the difference is I'm not part of it. I don't biologically have that, and I've realized that I can't live my life for other people to try and enter this community. I think that's what gives me the freedom. I don't seek validation, or I haven't been born into it where like my whole identity and like biological kind of is around it. So I'm able to literally detach myself. Like if I stop being a Muslim tomorrow, nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change. And I'm aware, again, that is a big, big privilege. And part of me wants to feel guilty, but I don't think people want me to feel bad for having that freedom. I'm just aware of
we want everyone else to have that freedom.
That's
the thing. That's what I'm trying to say, is that just like I wanted the freedom to not believe, I think it's important that everybody have the freedom to believe or not believe. You know what I mean? Like it's nobody's, if you want to not believe in hell, and if you want to believe that this ayah in the Quran is incorrect, that's cool, that's great, that's fantastic, but we're all going to share this planet together, and we all have to live together, and we cannot be the way we were raised as Muslims, which was just so intolerant of people who do not believe the exact same things that we believe, like to the minutia of detail. This is like when people can't believe the difference between Shia and Sunni. It's like, what is that? It like, they're killing each
abuse.
other.
If you're bringing up a child like that, that's psychological abuse. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just it is.
I don't even want to bring up my kids as Muslim. I don't know how I would bring my kids up, because if I married a Muslim man, I'd have to think long and hard about how I would bring them up in a faith, because I don't want to impose a faith on somebody. It would be easier for, I don't know, but I'm saying that's psychological abuse. I'm sorry, I mean, I'm not personally responsible for it, but I'm definitely not going to make excuses for it either. Like, more important is everybody having their freedom than like a religion having a reputation. Like, who cares? Sorry, like these are fundamental things that are so important. Stuff the rest. Sorry.
I cannot tell you how many times I'm posting about honor killings, or that this girl named Deborah in Nigeria who was just beat to death by her classmates because she said, can you please stop posting religious memes in this WhatsApp group? Can we keep it to course content?
That's not psychologically normal, because even if you think something's real, why would you get to the point where like life is less important? That's not healthy. That's psychologically messed up. That's messed up.
But people are looking at this picture, and some people have watched the video of this woman being beaten to death, and their answer is, that's not in Islam. Islam doesn't dictate that. Islam didn't.
This is what I say about the apologists. What are they doing about it? What are they doing to change it?
Yeah. And it's like ignoring the human beings and forget about defending the human beings, forget about defending human rights, forget about protecting children. Let's protect the religion. Let's defend the religion. That's where they go.
That is what bothers me. That is what bothers me
because so much.
If they cared one iota about faith, they'd know that the most sacred thing is about how you treat others and about life. And even if, and I shouldn't be saying this because I have a faith, even as a non-person of faith, I would care about human life, just basic values. Yeah. I don't know psychologically where they're at, that if you feel you have to defend something at the expense of all basic humanity. I don't understand it. It's messed up.
Agreed. Now we've got a half an hour over time, and I see that Erkan has his hand up, and I just want to ask you if you're okay with one more question, or
I'm fine to keep going.
Right.
Well, actually, Lois, to be fair, Lois's hand was up before mine. Lois?
Oh my God, I didn't even see it. I'm so sorry, Lois.
You wanna...
My background makes it hard to see, but no, Erkan, you had your hand up. Go ahead. I think you're going to say practically the same thing I would. So please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I was just going to say, come back to something Yas, and well, I didn't realize Yas was going to say it, but it's just really important for us to, I mean, Liz, your humanism has come across so many times during this interview, and don't get me wrong, but it's just really important that people understand the nature of ideologies and what Yas was saying. You know, anthropologists and sociologists have a term for the extreme nature of ideologies and why people belong to them. And it's called costly signaling theory. And the reason why people attach themselves to ideologies is because they're prepared to accept extreme statements, it's about taboo, it's about ritual, and people, so something like, for example, the reason why it exists, costly signaling theory, the reason why it exists, so the theory goes, is because it weeds out the pretenders. It weeds out people who are faking, right? So in order to be a fully paid up member of the group, you have to do extreme things and think extreme thoughts. So one of the things that they do is that, for example, a prime example from Islam would be fasting, for example, which is not good.
Didn't fast this year and didn't hide it. Just pointing out, I'm a total reject. I don't think anybody like.
But it's
anyway.
just one example. It's just so
demanding that you cut off this little piece of your son's penis, for example.
Yeah. So it's just, and I think we could include marriage for women as a costly signaling kind of example, because they've got more to lose than men. And I think that it's just really important for us to understand the nature of ideologies. It's great that you want to challenge Islam and its, patriarchal structure and all the rest. And that's brilliant. But I think there is a fundamental tension, and you have a battle ahead of you. And it's interesting to hear you try to, when you say you want to challenge the ideas, and because to my knowledge, as a Muslim, you would be obliged to follow Sharia, and you are obliged to follow the Quran.
I'm not having a go at you, but
says
who? Says who? I'm not obliged. I don't mean this attacking you, but how am I obliged? I mean, I'm not literally obliged because I'm not in a Sharia state. I'm not accountable to anybody. I literally decide what I do and when I do it. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of didn't want to marry a Muslim man again, because it was like, I do feel that like once you're married into it, it's like you're within that system thing. But then I don't want to like just reject an entire group of people. Who knows what will happen? But I know what you're saying, and I'm not really into like, I suppose technically I do follow an ideology, as in I am a Muslim, but I'm really, really light on it. I'm really just more focused on the spiritual side, to be honest. Like, I'm not like some big community figure. I'm not seen as this like Muslim whatever. Like, I'm really sort of like clinging on the end kind of thing. And if it came to somebody saying, but you've got to do this, I would just say, stuff it, sorry. Like, I literally don't feel any obligation to do a certain thing or feel a certain thing. And if it came push to shove, I'd probably leave Islam before that happened. So I know what you're saying, but I think, I'm not trying to make myself sound special or anything. I think if you're really into the ideology, yes, but I'm sort of on the outskirts of it, I suppose, really. Not as in I think I'm less legitimate, but in terms of like how things are practiced and how like it, as a religion, I'm very like individualistic at this point.
Thanks for the response. Thanks, Liz.
So do you want to take one more question? Lois has had her hand up. Okay, thank you, Lois.
Well, it's right along the same line. I keep asking myself, what is it about Islam that you do claim that is different than other religions? I mean, a lot of people take Christianity and mold it into what they feel, themselves. And how does that differ from what you're doing? I mean, what is it about Islam that you claim?
Right. Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I suppose the thing is, I see Islam as a more kind of like broader, holistic thing rather than like, this is a religion of Arabs or like Mohammed, etc. Like, I sit in synagogue, enjoy that. it's always been about the monotheistic thing, and I don't believe that like Islam is the only truth and you have to follow Islam. I feel like we're all here on this planet, and wherever you find kind of connection or truth, that's fine, and if you don't find it, that's fine. I suppose like the spiritual experiences I've had, that's something I've always clung on to. So even when I just thought, oh God, I can't do this anymore, like where am I just think back to those moments, and I feel like that was something personal between me and God, and that's kind of where I felt it was placed at in sort of the thought process, and that's what it is, and I'm not going to let people take that away from me. And I suppose again, in terms of like the books, and like I did have a connection to the Quran, life experiences, it's a more a spiritual thing, so I take that as kind of, okay, this is where I am, but it's not going to be dogmatically how I follow every single rule and live my life. It's just more of a principle of, I found something that means something to me, more just like a pathway to God, really. And that I have to be honest with myself. So before I would focus on the rules, I've just stopped that entirely and listened to my gut instinct, which we're also taught Islamically. It's like God's kind of the conscience that you're given. It's like a thing. I just stick to myself now and think, what feels right to me? God wants me to be happy. I don't need permission to do X, Y, Z. I'm allowed to be happy. I deserve to be happy. So whatever makes me happy and that doesn't harm people and that helps other people, that's the right way. I don't need a rule or a fatwa from like a sheikh or whatever. I just have to use my own common sense. And that's something that I've been given as a human being, common sense and feelings and rationality. And I'm at total peace with it because I don't feel any guilt. And actually, I've been able to engage in Muslim space recently and being at total peace with it. I don't feel any guilt, less anxiety. And I don't have all these things now where I have to like stop trying to think things, literally, or this fear anymore. So for some people, it may not make sense, but I'm just being true to myself. So yeah, I do still believe it's more about the God thing than the Muslim thing. I feel like Islam is a path to God rather than it being about Islam as one single thing and that being the only truth. I believe it's a truth that in like the fundamental like theological point of it all, how it's merged as a religion is something else. And everybody can find their own truths and things, and it's not really important whether you're Jewish, Muslim, Christian, or whatever. It's like if you're being true to yourself and you find something genuine. And I believe that's what really being a Muslim is, like somebody that like is in connection with that. I don't believe being a Muslim. I don't believe it's important that I'm this Muslim person that goes to the mosque and does this, and that says this, and that converts to this, and that's none of that's important at the end of the day. None of it.
Who is Mohammed in your view?
A person who was kind of guided and given like teaching and inspiration to give a message, and that's it, amongst others that had a message. And not a perfect human being. I don't know where the ideas come from. He's a human being like everybody else, and I have respect for him, but I don't pray to him. I don't like want to put his name on the wall. Like a lot of Muslims will say, of course we don't pray, but then they'll idolize him. They'll put his name next to God's, and I never understood that when I converted. If anything, I kind of had trouble with converting because I felt, did I not love him enough? And really, they were just idolizing him. So I'm just going to say it. They don't realize they're doing it, but they are. It was always about God for me. That was all I ever wanted was God, and to find like I found God in a place, and I accepted him as part of that package, as in he gave a message. But I struggled with that because I was told, you know, the internet, they'd be like, you have to love him more than your parents. I was like, oh, can't be Muslim then, because I don't love having more than my parents. Sorry, no, I don't. I love my parents, the people that gave me life and have nurtured me. I love him in a different way, somebody that I've never met, that I deeply respect and I have a profound respect for, but it's a totally different relationship. Oh, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Liz. We almost took 2 hours of your time when I only asked you for
It's been really
so
fun because I've just been asleep from jet lag.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, hopefully you get some rest and that you feel better. Yeah. And thank you so much again for giving us so much of your time and answering all of our questions and for being such an awesome person. And
thanks for having me on. It's been great to talk about it all.
Yeah, it was a treat. It was, you know, I'm so glad that you came in to speak to everybody so they could know how wonderful you are, just like I already knew. So that's great.
Just want to say thanks everybody for your questions. Thanks for listening to me. Hope I've not upset anybody. Just carry on being awesome and just being yourself, basically.
Thank you, Liz. And I'll share your Twitter when I post this.
Yeah.
And yeah, now you've got a whole bunch more supporters and people who will follow you and celebrate you.
I'm with
watch
you
grow.
in fighting all of the rubbish out there. Trust me.
Yes, you are. You, like Erkan said, you have a humanist spirit. That's
Yeah.
really what I'm feeling from you.
That's more
And
important than
that's-
anything else to me.
Yeah, yeah. Live and let live. All
Thank
right,
you so much,
ladies and
Yasmine.
gentlemen, thank you so much. Take care. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.